House Bill 1388, a bill that would infuse the Public Employee Retirement Association, or PERA, with new funds from bonds, passed the State House Committee this week. The bill faces a tougher test in the State Senate, but has backing from Governor Hickenlooper and the Colorado Education Association. Eric, PERA as a whole concept, as an issue, has always been a big one, especially the last several years between the state treasurer, PERA itself. What do you think of this proposal?
Well, unlike most of the issues around this table where we opine and, we just opine, this one I'd like to think I actually know something about. My firm in years gone by worked with PERA for a number of years. These days I'm involved in something called the Colorado Pension Project, having had that PERA experience under my belt, which is trying to reform PERA structurally on many levels. I won't get into that. The project doesn't have a particular take on this bond proposal. I do have a take, and I find it very concerning on a number of levels. I think it has the potential to dominate this final 4 or 5 days of the legislative session. The sheer magnitude of what we're talking about. There isn't a price tag within the proposal, but people have been on record as saying plus or minus $10 billion. That's billion with a B. What that does to the state's indebtedness, what that does to the state's risk exposure is huge. They have jerry-rigged this proposal together. First of all, just the lateness of it. Something of this consequence you don't drop at the 11th hour or the 11th hour and 59th minute. As the Denver Post editorial articulately said, you give this something like this some time to gestate, you give it time for public discussion, but they sprung this very, very late in the game. There's a lot of political firepower behind it, from the governor to some tacit support from the state treasurer, although he is feeling a lot of heat at this point from his Republican allies, to Lord knows the Colorado Education Association and other public employee union groups who have an obvious interest in this. Maybe David can use his welfare word again here, because it does a smack of that. This thing is jerry-rigged. They're issuing the bonds through the Colorado Housing Finance Authority. What this has to do with housing, anyone can tell me, but they're using that as a dodge around Tabor. The covenants in it that elevate the supremacy of PERA in the event of any economic hardship in this state, to where those debts go ahead of all other state services, is worrisome and troublesome. And the opposition to this is not only emerging on the right from the usual Republicans, but the Colorado Fiscal Policy Institute, which is a very left-leaning kind of organization, has also come out against it for exactly that reason. What this could do to other state services if and when the economy goes bad, as it does cyclically.
Susan, this is a very important issue. We have to tackle it to be sure that Colorado employees are taken care of, but is this the right way to do it? What do you think?
I agree with Eric. I mean, this is an enormously complicated issue. There's a study due out soon that I think would inform the issue a lot. And, to the criticisms that this is coming too late, the lawmakers and the people, including Hickenlooper, who are advocating for it, point to the fact that it took this long for PERA's board to vote on it. But we have how many days left in the session? A couple days left in the session. This is one of because it involves Tabor and because pensions are just complicated, and this housing authority bonding is complicated. So because it's all so complicated, I don't see why they shouldn't kick it down. I mean, I'm not a huge advocate of kicking things until the next session, but when I was making calls about this, nobody really seemed to know what to think about it, other than the fact that it's bipartisan. Certain people, they like it, but as Eric pointed out, there's a lot that stinks about it, especially the timing.
Patty, does this have a chance to get out of the 11th hour, seeing that there's A, some uproar about it, and B, a split legislature?
It has a chance if they all drink a lot at Cinco de Mayo across the street this weekend. We only have 3 more days in this legislative session, unless it goes into some kind of Tabor trouncing special session. This is not the only controversial financial bill. We still have the hospital funding program, and it is complicated. You wonder why the board couldn't have looked at a calendar and thought, maybe we need to come up with this a little sooner, instead of letting the legislators talk so long about drones and yoga instructors. I just think when it's this complicated, legislators will decide they will kick the can down the road, because it's too much to decide on right now.
David, do you buy the argument that the calendar placement's strictly because the PERA board voted late?
Sometimes, as I think Eric said on a previous show, it's sometimes easier to get things through late when everybody's in a hurry to wrap things up. While we're all trashing it, I should say that Penfield Tate is one of the major players in this, and if he were here, I'm sure he would be able to give a very cogent and strong advocacy for this. Not being a finance expert, what it looks like to me is we have pension benefits that have been promised to public school teachers, police officers, firefighters, all kinds of government employees who have worked for 20 or 30 years on the basis of the promises that they were made. The state government has drastically underfunded the contributions it should be making to have the money to pay those promises it made. And yes, one of the reasons they're underfunding it is because they spend so much money on welfare for people who haven't earned it, instead of saving the money for people who have earned it in government service. And then when you say, well, we're going to do this very complicated borrowing scheme that'll somehow get us out of the fact that we're not putting in and haven't been putting in the money we should, it seems simpler. Why don't you just cut the welfare spending and put the money in to the pension plans for the real employees? And even if you don't want to do it, it should go to the voters, and it should be discussed in much more detail than and with time and transparency than we can have in a rush at the end.
For the record, that's $10 more for the welfare fund there. Just want to be sure. Let's keeping track.
That pays for all the beer after the show, as you well know.